We had a very strong tax accountant that helped us with taking advantage of taxes. Go to JCPenney's, and when they buy your shoes and they give you an order of $1 million, and it's, whoa, this is really cool. He got leukemia and passed away. So that had a lot to do with the direction and the emphasis to keep things moving forward. The stuff would sell out faster than we could make it. Thank you. This was not as bad as I expected. No, I'm just kidding. All good. I thank you for including us.
All right. How are we doing, everybody? Welcome to the Leaders and Legends podcast. This is a podcast where we feature notable business leaders in the Oshkosh area. Today we have the guest, Mr. Bill Wyman of the Oshkosh Community Foundation, as well as former interim president of Oshkosh B'gosh, as well as a board member of Oshkosh B'gosh as well. So, Bill, thank you so much for jumping on.
Well, thank you. I'm honored to be here and looking forward to today. I actually never was the president of Oshkosh B'gosh, but I'll take it if that's what you want to give to me. That's great.
Well, tell me a little bit about your upbringing. Where are you from? How'd you get here? What's your story?
I grew up in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and I went to Washington School, which will be the last year anybody ever goes to Washington School. And then I moved out to the South Side and went to South Park. And then I was lucky enough to go to Wayland Academy, which is a prep school in Beaver Dam, Wisconsin. Graduated from there and went to Ripon College for a couple of years. Had too much fun at Ripon and ended up at UW Oshkosh, where I graduated in December of 1980.
Okay. So you went to Ripon College where Harrison Ford went, isn't that the rumor?
Yes, he went there. We both left for the same reason. There was a bar in the basement. We both hung out there too long. He was there years before I was, though.
Oh, that's good. So when did you kind of start your career?
Started my career. I would say working at Oshkosh B'gosh, I started working there when I was 16 years old. I worked in the warehouse, breaking down boxes and mowing the lawn and just doing little stuff, whatever, sweeping the floors, whatever they asked me to do.
So I want to talk about just the history of Oshkosh B'gosh for a second. Obviously when you travel around the country and you say you're from Oshkosh, one of the first things people stop you and say is, "Oh, Oshkosh B'gosh, the baby clothes." That's it. And I wanted, where did this company start? Give us a little background and history and context of the organization in general, to the best of your knowledge.
Oshkosh B'gosh started as Oshkosh Overall Company in 1895. I can't remember the name of the gentleman that started. Then there was a Pollock bought the company, and there's a Pollock house on the university, and the community pool is named Pollock. And then in 1937, Mr. Pollock moved to Kansas, where he started Key Manufacturing Company, which was a competitor of Oshkosh. And my grandfather and Sam Pickard, who was a banker in Neenah, Wisconsin, purchased Oshkosh B'gosh. So at that time, it was strictly men's workwear, manufactured in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. We basically helped farmers and loggers back, it was for lumberjacks, and we were basically making farm clothes and things like that. In the early 60s, Miles Kimball started carrying the pint-size version of the genuine article. That's what they called it. It was basically our denim bib overall, adult size, and we downsized it for them. And it became extremely popular. My grandfather opened two factories, one in Kentucky and one in Tennessee. So at that time, there were three manufacturing companies, and places like Neiman Marcus and Bloomingdale's, all these really upscale department stores wanted that particular item. So it just grew and grew. We started making more. We started making corduroy, then we made pants, and we made knit shirts, and more department stores were buying it. And from probably the mid to late 70s through the whole 80s, it was just boom, boom, boom. We couldn't make enough. I was a salesman on allotment. The stuff would sell out faster than we could make it. We had 19 manufacturing plants at one point. Things were really good. And then I remember I was a salesman in Sacramento, California, calling on department stores, or two 12 store department store chains, and all of a sudden there was a brand called Hush Puppies, which was a shoe brand, but they had licensed their name to someone in China to copy us, and all the price was less. So that was in my mind, that was the start of the problem with the prices. And the early 90s, we started to close plants and source things overseas. And at the same time, the Gap and Kohl's and JCPenney were starting to make what they called private label. So they'd have their own brand. So a small children's wear manufacturer going into a big factory in China didn't have a lot of impact when Gap would follow them in or Walmart would follow us in and offer the same type of product and give them a better price and, of course, larger quantities. So we were getting pressure from the sourcing side. And then we were also getting pressure because we grew our business so much, JCPenney's and then places like Hudson. Dayton's was a department store in Minneapolis, and Hudson's was a department store in Detroit, and Marshall Field's was a department store in Chicago. Well, they all started to merge. Now it's called Dayton Hudson's, I guess. I don't even know if that's around anymore. So all of a sudden, there was just one buyer buying our products. So we were getting the pressure from the large department stores wanting markdown money, and why is your shirt not delivered at the same time as the pant, which one's made in Vietnam and the other one's made in China. We had to bring all the stuff into Tennessee and ship it out together. It just got to be really complicated. So we had to make a decision. Either we were going to buy other manufacturing plants, other brands similar to what Vanity Fair was doing. They were buying White Stag, they were buying Lee, they were buying all sorts of Vans, all sorts of different companies. So we had a choice to either do that or sell our little apparel brand to some other larger conglomerate. So in 2005, we sold the business to Carter's, which was another children's wear company. So it felt pretty positive that we were continuing to sell it to an ethical, strong company. Yeah. So that's a long story for a short question.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I was kind of curious of what goes into the decision making in selling a company like that, or kind of the mergers acquisitions world that you were kind of a part of during that phase. Like you'd mentioned the difficulty of the decision. How are those decisions made? How does that start? Where does that go? Just kind of curious of how that happens.
Well, I think with us it was a little different because it was a public company, but the Wyman Hyde family had most of the most of the stock and the management. I had a cousin, Mike Wattell, who was the COO. He was in charge of all operations, and he got leukemia and passed away. So that had a lot to do with the direction and the emphasis to keep things moving forward. So that affected us. We did have a public board of directors. We had the lady that owned Duracell. We had one of the bigwigs from Oscar Mayer. We had a gentleman from, at the time, it was Lacoste on our board from New York. So we had a pretty diverse board of directors, but those discussions, it just made sense just to talk about it, to talk about selling.
What happened after the sale kind of went through in 2005? So now it's current state with this company is owned by Carter's, still operates a little bit out of here. I mean, I see across the street, or how does that work?
They bought the building. The majority of the people were asked to travel to Atlanta. That's where Carter's was. Some people left. Some people left and got other jobs, left Oshkosh B'gosh or Carter's and got other jobs in the community. They kept, for some reason, Carter's kept a lot of our accounting department. We had a very strong tax accountant that helped us with taking advantage of taxes, I'll say. And we had a very strong customer relations department. So those are the two areas that Carter's kept here. Otherwise, everybody moved to Atlanta.
In your time, which it was something like 25 years at Oshkosh B'gosh, what were some of the key highlights in your experience reflecting on your career that other people could take away and glean insight from?
Well, I think coming right out of college at UWO, where I was back living with my parents, to go and get a job. I happened to be in South Bend, Indiana, and travel and be on my own and have to figure out what to do and get around. Just like anybody else, when you graduate from hospital, from college, or you get on your own, you had to make some big change. Just had to change your life. So that was a big step. Working with big department stores like JCPenney's, I was in charge of the licensing stuff. So I wasn't really in charge of selling a little bit of overalls. I was in charge of like shoes and dresses and socks and stuff that we didn't actually produce. We just collected a royalty off. So to go to JCPenney's, and when they buy your shoes and they put, they give you an order of $1 million. I mean, it's, whoa, this is really cool. So that was some highlights. And like you said earlier, wherever I would go, people would say, well, where are you from? And I would say, well, I'm from Oshkosh. And they said, I know where you work. Where are you from? So that was common. So just to be associated with the company was really cool.
It was a funny story. One time when I was working for Oshkosh Defense on the NGDV program, we had brought in some consultants from the UK, and they had driven by the new headquarters as it was built. And they said, wow, look at that new headquarters. Like, is that your building? And one of our chief engineers says, no, that's the baby clothes. And he looks at me and he says, we can't tell them that because then they're going to charge more money if they think that's our new building. So it's pretty funny. We're like, yeah, that's the baby clothes place over there. And it was,
no, our business is where the county is now. I don't know what direction, but it's right here, right over here.
Yeah.
I remember when the first floor, where the sidewalk is, those doors would open, and the rolls of the rolls of fabric would come in on the trucks, and they'd put them down in the basement, and then they'd go to the fourth floor, and that was the cutting room. And then third and second floor was the actual sewing operation. And then the first floor was the distribution center and the office. So when I was a little kid, it was basically all right here.
Wow. That's a really cool story. And I think it's such a rich history. And I can look out my office and I can see that one of the founding companies that really built this town is just right here. And it's just really cool to hear kind of the history of how that came about and the coming of age of that company. I want to talk a little bit about, very quickly, while we're on the topic of Oshkosh B'gosh, you have experience within clothing retail. If there are entrepreneurs out there looking to get into this market, as you kind of reflect on your career, look at the current market today, what's some advice you would give to someone that wants to make a space or wants to get into the clothing business or things like that?
The designers have great ideas, and there's a lot of really neat stuff out there, but to have it manufactured at a price point and a quality level that has to be done, it's just extremely difficult. And you're also competing against so many people. The markets are so large. If you're going to make a small batch of product, you might be able to find like a mom and pop store or a little catalog company, but you'd have to start really small and let it grow. It'd be extremely difficult to come up and create a new Calvin Klein or some big brand in today's world.
How would it be done if you had to start a company or something like that in clothing retail, something along those lines? Like, what would be kind of your strategy that you think would maybe make it work?
I would say find a specific item that you really think is going to be strong and has momentum. I mean, Ralph Lauren started with ties. Oshkosh B'gosh started with a little bit of overalls. Nordstrom's, I know that's not a manufacturer, but they were a shoe store. So you have to start with something that's a key thing that works and then expand from that.
So start with something extremely niche that you think can make a difference, and then eventually add the accessories, add the different types of product lines and things like that.
That's what I would suggest, yes.
Yeah, very cool. Let's pivot. So, 2005, you were in a family business and you were part of the growth, more or less an exit in that company. What inspired you to kind of get more involved with Oshkosh and the community? When did you decide to start the Waters, which is one of our, more prominent businesses in town. How did that come about? When did you kind of take the step into entrepreneurship and community activist?
While I was at Oshkosh B'gosh had a foundation. It was a corporate foundation. They gave 2% of their sales towards nonprofits. So I liked that. I thought that was really cool and interesting. So that's how I kind of got involved in nonprofit work in the foundation. So that kind of carried me over into once Oshkosh B'gosh sold. I stayed with the foundation at the time. I was a board member. So that's kind of what kept me here, I'll say, rather than going somewhere else. Not to mention that I just like it here, and there's a lot of great people here. But as far as the Waters, the American Legion, how that happened was I grew up right next door on Legion Place, a little tiny street right off the side there. So I would go down there when I was a little kid, and I would play there. So then the other thing is the Oshkosh Yacht Club. I like to competitive race sailboats. And that building was built as the Oshkosh Yacht Club back in 1869, I think. So, actually 1903. But anyway, so when the yacht club would lease the harbor and keep the boats in the harbor, but they would only get a 1-year lease. So the harbor was starting to deteriorate, and the yacht club members never wanted to put money into it because they only get it for a year. So we started talking to them, or my wife basically, Beth and I started talking to the Legionnaires about what's going to happen. All the Legionnaires most of them were World War II vets, and they weren't taking the time, or they didn't have the ability to keep the maintenance of the building up. So it was getting really expensive for them to even call in a plumber or whatever. So the building started to continue to deteriorate. So we kept offering them that we would be interested in purchasing the building. So finally, after like 6 years of this discussion, they finally brought it to their board, and they voted to sell us the building.
What was that like? Did you have a pretty clear idea of what you wanted to do with it, or how'd you come up with the ideas for kind of what it's turned into?
Well, we didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings, I'll say. So we said the Legion could continue to have their meetings there for 50 years. And the lease with the yacht club is 50 years. This is our 15th year now. So they've got 35 more years, but whatever. So we wanted to develop the building to be able to service those needs. The other thing that was happening, the Pioneer had closed. The convention center was in not very good shape. The Payne, what else? The university that now has the Culver Center, the place across the street from Peabody's that Aaron Christen, I can't say the name of it. None of those places were open. So there wasn't a nice event facility in Oshkosh at the time. So we felt that there was a market for a nice place to have weddings. So that's kind of another reason that we got involved in it. But true to our hearts, my heart, I don't know if Beth would agree with me, but we wanted it to have the home of the yacht club. Yeah. So that was kind of the whole thing. As far as how did we figure out what it was going to look like and everything, we hired a local lady that was an interior designer, and she helped us manage it all. This was right after we had sold Oshkosh B'gosh. So there was a little bit of revenue there from the sale. So I remember we took a trip to Chicago to buy the lighting for the building. And I don't know if you've been in there, but there's lots of chandeliers. It's really nice. We had a budget. About to redo the whole thing was going to cost about $700,000. And we went down to Chicago in one day, and we spent about $650,000 just on lighting. So it was a little bigger than what we planned.
Yeah. Beautiful building, though, and it's definitely like a modern staple, I think, of the community. So it's interesting to kind of hear where that story came from, how you kind of remember this from your childhood, and were able to kind of really save a good memory from the Oshkosh community. You mentioned sailing. I mean, what kind of... You do competitive sailing? What other kind of sailing? Have you ever done like any kind of adventures or journeys or anything crazy?
I've been to the BVI on a drunken week sailing from island to island, but a lot of people have done that. No, we've done a lot of competitive sailing. I grew up, my dad sailed, my grandfather sailed, so we've been sailing. I think that's one of the reasons that my children are in town, because they were sailing and the water and the type of racing we do. We go out and race for a couple hours, then we come back and talk about it and just have fun. So it's not, we're not racing from Chicago to Mackinac out on a hot day when there's no wind. I mean, we'd rather go home and cut the lawn than do something like that.
I've been seeing things that like younger generations aren't as interested in some of those things, like golf, sailing, like a lot of these different hobbies that were kind of, previous generations spent time doing. Have you noticed that at all? Or do you think there's more of an appetite as you see younger generations get involved in the sailing kind of hobby?
I think it ebbs and flows. The technology of sailing's changed so much in the last few years with the foils, where the boats can get up right out of the water and there's no friction, so they go really fast. I think that's helped just the whole young people involved with like windsurfing and sailboarding and kiteboarding and all that kind of stuff. The boats so we race, there's been a lot of technology and there's a large young crowd, but the boats that we race are actually, they're built in Lake Geneva in Zenda, Wisconsin. And it's a tradition, these scows, that they've been racing for hundreds of years. And there's a lot of families that their grandfathers, just kind of like our family. It's just something that the family does. Just like, I'll compare it to the Andretti family or the racing cars. I mean, it's just something that they do.
Yeah. Oh, very cool. I want to talk a little bit about the Oshkosh Community Foundation. Tell me a little bit about it. Someone that's newer to the community, what are they involved in? What are some of the projects since you've been in Oshkosh? Where have you seen the community come kind of since you've been involved in some of these different nonprofit organizations?
Well, the mission of the Oshkosh Area Community Foundation is to strengthen communities. And then we do it through leadership, collaboration, and stewardship. So that's that's what you'll read in our book. Basically, what we do is we work with donors to help them with their charitable desires. So if someone wants to give money to, make it up, children, then we'll meet with the donor and go over what specifically thing they like, and then we'll help them go to a nonprofit or to a program or a project that they're interested in. So that's kind of high level what we do. I feel that we do a very good job of understanding what's happening in the community on a nonprofit and on a kind of cultural side, everything from new schools to health and basic needs and religion. We kind of keep track of what's going on so that when a donor does come to us, we can kind of help them along. So I feel that that's a huge asset that we bring to a donor that it would be difficult for them to maneuver through and figure out themselves. Sure. Now, a lot of what we have is over the years, donors have trusted us and given us money in their will. So we have a lot of what's called field of interest funds or designated funds, where it's basically an endowment. So the person passes away and maybe gives you, I don't know, let's think high, $1 million. And then we just invest that. And then we take a small portion, I think about 4.5% out a year, and give that to whatever that donor wanted. So it goes on forever. That's why our logo is For Good Forever.
What are some of the current things you're working on in the community that you're able to share that are maybe public?
Well, one of the most current things that the whole community was involved in was we called it Taking Route 2. And the ash borer is a huge issue throughout the northern Midwest, where the ash trees are all dying because this little green bug is eating them all. So in Oshkosh, the state gave the city a bunch of money, and they attacked the terrace trees. There were a lot of terrace trees, like 700 terrace trees that died. So the city came and cut down the trees and took out the stumps. And then the city came to the community foundation and had $100,000 that they gave us to basically match a fundraising campaign. So we went out and raised $200,000. So there's $300,000 for new trees to go in terraces. So that's kind of a recent thing.
Sure. What type of involvement have you had with the Economic Development Corporation, the Go EDC? I know you're one of the board members at Go EDC. What are some of the goals and targets from an economic development perspective to bring to Oshkosh? What are things that you think we need, things that would help improve the community, things that might be potential entrepreneur opportunities to invest in or pursue?
Go EDC, the main role I believe with Go EDC is to maintain and grow the businesses that are already here. So as far as what's new and what's needed, it would be what the businesses here are missing. But the chamber, which also does a fantastic job, I think they're more in an avenue of bringing new business in. There's a lot of overlap there, and there's a lot of positive things that happen together. But as far as new business, what needs to come here, that's hard to say. I would think if there's a large company like maybe Oshkosh Corp or Amcor, and they need some sort of specific type of product for their finished product, that type of vendor would be great to come here. But I can't really tell you what is better than another. I know the chamber's involved with Amplify, which I know you're very involved in. It's kind of the IT side of things, which is really important. That's booming everywhere in the United States, so that's strong. The Go EDC is kind of targeted aviation as a key area to grow in this community. So those are two areas that we're trying to grow.
Yeah. Do you think there is, what's the word I'm looking for? If you reflect on success stories from beginning of your career to the end of the career, what were some of those companies? What were some of those people? What were some of the common themes with businesses that ended up successful here? What would you say they all had in common if you're kind of reflecting on the different organizations you've been a part of?
Or something?
Just a short period of time.
I think some of the strongest businesses over the years that have been here a long time had people that ran the business that were involved in the community. And I think it's really important for organizations to understand the whole community and get more people involved. I mean, that's one of the key reasons why I like what I do, is because Oshkosh B'gosh wouldn't be what it was if it weren't for the community. And not only the name, but all the people that worked there and made it strong. So I think any business, it doesn't matter if it's the Moslings with Oshkosh Truck or the Vettys with SNC or maybe some of the companies, the Leaches, they were all very involved in the community and what happens in the community. I think that's very important.
What are some good ways that you could get involved if you aren't necessarily involved yet?
We'll get on the chamber board like you.
Yeah.
No, whatever they want. It could be through your church. It could be through volunteering at an organization that they're fond of. I mean, you can get involved anyway. It's just going to the farmer's market, shop in the grocery store, right. Just be involved, just get to know the community.
Yeah, that was one of the themes that we had when we started the Venture Project. Is it's right there on the wall, bloom where you're planted. So these ideas of like getting plugged into the local chamber, not only can they provide excellent resources, network and connection, but they can provide mentorship and all sorts of other great benefits. So our proud sponsor, the Oshkosh Chamber of Commerce today, that'll be our quick infomercial. You know? Yeah, contact Rob in the back if you want to become a member. But no, I think I appreciate that insight, because you're right. It's about how do you build that network as an entrepreneur, because you're alone. And when we look at entrepreneurs, the first thing we're trying to do is figure out what kind of organizations can we plug them into to get them growth focused, to try to find them, because they're their own salesperson, they're their own HR, they're their own accountant. You know, they don't have the resources. So mentorship is a really big part of it. I wanted to just ask one question before I open it up to the audience a little bit. And I wanted to ask you this, and we can elaborate as much as needed. But one thing that you had gone on the record a little bit vocally about the homelessness issue in Oshkosh, and I think there's a lot of perspectives on ways that we can view that, if it's really an issue, if it's not an issue, if there's what we can do to help some of these different people. I just want to get your thoughts on what are some of the things going on right now that's helping a growing homelessness population in Oshkosh, and what can we do about it as community leaders, as businesses? What are some of our options in your perspective?
I would like to start by saying that there is a need to help the homeless, and there are strong organizations in this community that are doing very good things for the homeless. So if people think that the Community Foundation or myself was against what was happening with a day-by-day warming shelter, that's ridiculous, because we believe very strongly in the day-by-day warming shelter. What they're doing is terrific and it's necessary. I think one thing that could have been done sooner and needs to be done going forward is more collaboration across all the areas of homelessness. When you think of homelessness, you think of the guy. Just the other day, there was someone sleeping in front of UFit, my fitness studio. So it's everywhere. But that's not the only problem. You have everything from don't get evicted to, okay, now I got evicted, where am I going to live tomorrow? How am I going to figure out what's my next step as far as like transitional housing and then permanent housing? So you have a lot of different steps, and then you have a lot of different types of people. You have like single men, and then you have working people at a low income wage that can't afford a home, and then you have maybe I'll say single parent families that got evicted. Where are they going to go? So you can't just say there's one answer, because there's so much going on. We, as a community foundation, you asked me one of the proud things that we've done over the years. We brought a transitional housing organization to this community called COTS, and it's basically for single men. There are a couple women, but not only is it just transitional housing, there's a lot of training that goes on. They go through financial training, how to get a house, all that type of stuff. There's a bunch of stuff that they're required to do. So I think there's not enough of that here. I think there needs to be more of helping people get out of the situation. But it's even bigger than that, because there's a lot of people that just either can't or don't want to get out of the situation. And I think that's the biggest problem, is how we're going to deal with that. Because it's not just Oshkosh. I mean, Oshkosh may see it, and it is growing here, but you look at big cities, Portland, Seattle, New York, Honolulu, I mean, everywhere. So it's a problem that you can't just flip a switch. So asking me what's the long-term view, how can we fix it, we've got to get a lot of people that are involved in it to work together to find a strategy.
So it sounds like almost a coalition of the multiple nonprofit efforts that are existing to kind of unify, figure out where the common ground is, and figure out how we can approach the different reasons of why someone might be homeless and address those reasons specifically in kind of a unified program.
Yes, I would say even beyond nonprofits, it's local businesses, it's government, it's county, it's city. I mean, it has to be a well-rounded group of different people with different ideas. I also think that we have to all agree to what the strategy is going to be, and we also have to all put our time in to make that strategy happen, instead of going back to, well, this is what I do every day, and this person needs this, and this person needs that. That all needs to be done too. But we got to look at a big picture and come up with a strategy.
Sure. It is as your kind of role with the Oshkosh Area Community Foundation, just for my awareness too, and I think the listeners, what are some of the organizations that are partaking specifically in addressing homelessness or housing issues in the Oshkosh community? Just off the top of your head, if there were a few names that you know that are
Well, I think the
working on
county's
this.
doing a good job as far as addressing it, hiring Lou Shear. I think she's really has her head on straight. She's a really smart lady, and she's going to help. I think that most of the nonprofits are trying to help. It's just that they get so involved in their everyday business that, I mean, it's not like they have a bunch of extra employees just to think round table what to do. So I wouldn't say that there's any nonprofit or local business that doesn't want it to work. It's just maybe collaborating and everybody get together, convene a group and start discussing it.
No, I think I appreciate that insight. I wanted to leave, we have a little bit of time left with Mr. Wyman. I just want to leave some time for questions from the audience. We do have some microphones where Elle will be walking around. We just ask you to say your question into the mic so we can get on the record for the podcast.
I was waiting to not be the first. I have a question, something you said earlier, and I was pleased to hear about your outward focus with the community and things. You had said with the community foundation that you basically are keeping your eyes on what's happening in the community, and you're able to translate that for donors to understand what the needs are. Can you talk about what that is? How do you do that? How do you know what the needs of the community are?
Sure. First of all, we have competitive grant cycles, and we have a director of programs that works with the nonprofits to explain the different grant cycles we have. That we have one for aging, we have one for youth, we have one for basic needs. So there's all these types of grants that we give out. So we learn a lot about what's happening in the community by the nonprofits giving us the grant applications. And then we work with those nonprofits to verify more specifics on what they're looking for and find out more how they're run. So that's part of it. I think we also have staff that's been very involved for a lot of years. So they just kind of know the ropes and who's who, and they just go out and talk to people. We do have donors that come to us also with ideas and different ways to do things that we can offer that information to the nonprofits to see if they're interested in doing things maybe a little differently. Did I answer your question? Okay.
Thank you so much, and we appreciate your efforts on our behalf. The question I have is that this homelessness seems to be somewhat of a, how do I say this, perhaps a culture that these people have. And I question, is there anything we can do that that we could do to change the culture that has given us this homeless? It was never part of our culture traditionally to have this. Is there anything we can do that we can be aware of, that we can help change that culture so that it does not happen to future generations that you might be aware of? And I was wondering if that's something that might want to be considered. I know that's a pretty heavy duty thing to do, but I thought I'd bring it up for your consideration.
I don't know how to answer that. Mark, I was talking to Mark Roloff this morning, in fact, and he said we just have to figure out a plan. And I said to Mark, well, if you can figure out a plan here, sell it to every other community across the country, and we'd all benefit. But I think that's from years of different views of how culture is and how families were raised, and I mean it's very, very complicated. I don't know what to tell you. That's part of the problem.
Can you just talk a little bit about like maybe the differences in working for a for-profit compared to a nonprofit, and just what you liked about both?
Working for a profit company, there's a lot of I'll say pressure. There's a lot of, you got to get things done in a certain time, or you're going to lose a delivery, or if the part doesn't come in time, you can't build the thing, so it's going to cost more. Or there's a lot of daily, I'll say, stress levels Working for a nonprofit, there's still stress levels, but it's a little different. It's more of a, I'll say, positive culture. Though anyway, the community foundation has a very positive outlook on what things are going to do in the future, and if we don't, I mean, this might sound bad, but if we don't get something done today, we can figure out how to get things done in the future. So it's not hard lined day after day. We were just joking with some of the staff about this quarter versus next quarter. I work for a public company, and we had to do better every quarter, or otherwise our stock would go down. So there could be times, not that we would ever do this, but you'd hold back something and do it maybe the next quarter to get the income rather than this quarter. Where in the nonprofit, it really doesn't. I mean, if we spike one year and then have a little down the next year, it's not going to really affect us. But it's fun to have an increase every year, but it's not as drastic or as important.
Bill, I mean, we partnered with you on all sorts of different projects, whether it's education, downtown, other partners involved and engaged with that. But specifically talking about downtown, and we've kind of worked on some projects recently, why is that so important to you and the foundation and others? I mean, and why is it so important to the community that we really continue to promote downtown and Central City?
Well, I think that any city or any community has to have like a core place. It has to have a home. Highway 41 is great. It's got all the stuff you need, but you have to have a center, a city center, a reason to come here. Otherwise, what does Oshkosh mean? So I think that there's a couple of things that downtown needs. I think it needs more housing. I mean, upscale, nice housing, and I think that having people live here they will stay here. They'll come to the downtown. They'll eat dinner here. They'll do their shopping here, whatever. I think that's important for just community. Otherwise, you can get in your car and go to Appleton or Milwaukee or Chicago, and there's no home. I feel very strongly about community and the need to have the relationship and the friendship and just the understanding of what home is.
Just to piggyback on that for a second. So you mentioned you think a good way to continue to improve downtown is to increase housing options. What about business needs? Do you think that's going to come directly from a residential increase, or do you think that there's a need for certain types of industry in downtown area, city center area?
Well, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? I believe that there are entrepreneurs that would make small businesses happen downtown if they had customers. So I think we need to have people living here. And when I say living, apartment life is great, and there's a lot of apartments down here, but to have people that are, I'll say, permanently here with equity, a home or a condominium or a family that's growing up in this area, I think that's crucial. Because otherwise, people move in, they'll stay here a couple of years, and then they'll leave. And then what happens? Then somebody else comes in. You don't get that value of community anymore.
I feel like I've heard anecdotally condo developments in this area would do well. I know a lot of people that have mentioned that. Larger, like you're saying, kind of upscale condos in downtown, utilizing our river views, our kind of river system and things like that. So I think I would agree with you there. One thing I've noticed in regards to kind of housing is it seems like there's a little bit of a lack in the city center of kind of middle class housing, just kind of mid-range homes. There seems to be lower middle class housing. There seems to be nice homes around the lake. What are some solutions to that, in your opinion?
Well, first of all, I think there's a lot of apartments, and I don't know this because I'm not a developer and I don't really understand how their business works, but I believe that they're more profitable building apartment buildings than they are condominiums. So I think that's one of the main reasons why there are so many apartments and not so many, I'll say, owner-occupied facilities.
Sure.
I would agree with you. There's some very nice homes along the lake, and then there's some middle-class houses around, but there's a lot of homes that have been dilapidated, or whatever type of word you want to use, that have become more of a rental. And not that rentals are bad, but there are some rentals that aren't kept up, and it doesn't help the community.
Yeah. Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback. More question. Yeah.
I'm in the back here, Bill.
Hi, Wayne.
How are you? I haven't seen you for a long time. My question is not really a question, but it's a thank you, personal thank you. For all the things that you've done over the years, and I've known you for 40 plus years since we were kids working at the distribution center. I can still remember that summer. So I just want to say thank you to you and your family for all the things that you have accomplished and are trying to accomplish. Appreciate all the effort.
Well, thank you. It takes a village, right? It's not one person. It takes everybody to march forward.
Takes a community.
Takes a community, perfectly. Not a village, a community.
Thank you. Was that one hard? I just wanted to come back to the homelessness because a comment was made earlier that I've been kind of struggling with, and what I'm hoping to encourage you to do in response to my response is to dig deeper into the homelessness issue and what is happening. I think everybody recognizes that there have been numerous factors involved with homelessness, including economic and changes in so many things in our environment, that I'm hoping to encourage you and the foundation to really dig into that and help figure some of that out so that people can be addressed with dignity about what it is that is going on for them, and help them move not through mandatory programming so much, but available resources, and make sure that their needs are being addressed.
I would agree 100%, and I would think that the Oshkosh Area Community Foundation has the reputation of trying to help, I'll say, in a lot of other areas, and we've been able to convene organizations together to talk about things. So we've been involved. Hopefully, maybe some little steps have been taken already, but we need to do more. So I appreciate your wanting us to help, and we will do what we can.
Any other questions for Mr. Wyman? Mr. Wyman, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. This was not as bad as I expected. No, I'm just kidding. All good. I thank you for including us.
One round of applause. Thank you very much.